Tonight, we begin with a birthright lost in ink, a castle that whispers in Latin, and a lineage buried not in earth, but in silence. This is not a story of kings who conquered, it's a story of children they betrayed, across 5 forgotten kingdoms of Europe. Heirs were born into privilege, and then erased by rumor, by decree, or by the quiet scraping of a quill. These were sons and daughters who should have ruled, but didn't, not because they failed, but because someone made sure they wouldn't succeed. From a boy locked in a Venetian convent until madness took him, to a girl crowned in secret beneath the Alps, only to vanish like morning mist. Each episode will unravel their true stories, ones that history tried to forget. Hey friends, tonight we begin with a veil of snow over the old Alpine road, a silver coronet hidden in a monk's satchel, and a single name inked in a forgotten ledger, a name that should have changed the shape of Europe, but didn't. So before we drift too far forward, take a deep breath, turn down the lights, settle into stillness, and remember, not all lost things are dead. Some are only waiting to be remembered. Tonight, we begin with a girl who should have been queen, but her throne was buried long before her body ever was. She was born in 1292, but she didn't know it. Her first memory was the sound of bells, not the grand chimes of a court cathedral, but the dull, wooden clang of a monastery, our bell soft, predictable, distant. She lived in stone corridors with narrow windows and colder floors, surrounded by robed figures who whispered in Latin and never used her name. To them, she was child, or sometimes gift, though it never felt like a compliment. Her real name, Margareta de Lorenzia, was only spoken once, when she was 5, in the dead of winter. A monk had drunk too much sacramental wine and muttered it while tucking her into her cot. She never heard it again, but Margareta remembered it, just like she remembered the way the abbot bowed when the black-robed man came from the valley, just like she remembered the day they brought her a small silver circlet and called it a plaything. It wasn't a toy. It was a crown, small, delicate, too heavy for a child's head. But Margareta placed it on her brow in secret when no one watched, and she would whisper to the cracked stone walls, "I am Margareta, Queen of..." But she never knew of where the land had been taken before she was even born. The crown had once belonged to a principality called Great Alvain. Not many maps mark it now. It existed in the craggy wedge between modern-day Italy, Austria, and Switzerland, a tangle of forests, forgotten dialects, and cold rivers that whispered secrets in tongues no one speaks anymore. Great Alvain had no cities. It had castles clinging to cliffs, monasteries chiseled into stone, and one palace that had burned before Margareta took her first steps taught her father Ulrich of Great Alvain had ruled it briefly. Then he died suddenly. No one had said how the chroniclers at court recorded fever, but the kitchen boy who fled to Zurich whispered knife. He left behind one heir, a daughter, but daughters were soft things in a hard world, and Great Alvain was too valuable to be left to one. So the crown passed, not to Margareta, but to the House of Arberg, a powerful family with deeper coffers and sharper blades. They claimed Ulrich had made promises, debts, concessions, that the girl had been born of a common mistress, that there was no child at all. The monks paid and sworn to silence, spirited the infant away under the cover of night. Her mother, chambermaid, named Lorenzia, was last seen weeping barefoot in the snow, near the river. She never appeared again, but the child lived. The monks took her to San Giusto Abbey, high in the Engadine Alps, and there she grew without answers, without affection, but not without memory, because memory, even when denied, leaves shadows by. The time Margareta was 13, the monks had stopped pretending she was one of them. They fed her, they clothed her, they taught her Latin, history, the Psalms. But she saw the way they bowed when she passed, the way the abbot lowered his eyes, the way none of them dared raise a hand to her, even when she rebelled. In the old crypt beneath the chapel, she found records birth, ledgers, annals, forgotten relics. She copied names by candlelight, whispering them like prayers. Ulrich Lorenzia, Great Alvain. She pieced it together slowly, like a tapestry unraveling in reverse. The letters matched the name she'd once heard, the seal on a waxed envelope, matched the circlet locked away in the reliquary, and the symbols carved into the old stone thrown in the abbey's vestry. The same spiral crest engraved on her silver comb. Her father's crest. They had not erased her lineage, only buried it. The abbey changed the day. The man in blue came. He wore no cross, no sword, only a ring with the House of Arberg's emblem. Coiled ass biting its tail. He asked for the girl. The monks didn't ask which one. They brought him, Margareta. She was 16 now, tall, graceful, too clever for their comfort. He examined her like a relic, walked around her, frowned, tapped her shoulder blades, commented on her posture. "She do," he said. Then he handed the abbot a coin pouch heavy enough to hush a cathedral. Margareta left at dawn, escorted by 6 guards in red cloaks and a woman who never spoke above a whisper. They didn't tell her where they were going, but she already knew. Home, or what was left of it. Gredelvane Castle was not a ruin, but it felt like one. It had new banners, new guards, new tapestries, but the bones were old. The stones remembered. They creaked at night. The new ruler count, Adalric of Arberg, welcomed her with a smile that never reached his eyes. "You are to be presented," he said. "Not as heir, of course, but as kin, a cousin, a distant relation, a charity, really." Margareta bowed. Inside, her blood burned. She spent weeks in the southern wing, locked from the inside each night. She was given gowns, tutors, and a governess who smiled more when she drank. She was taught court etiquette and forbidden to mention her parents. She was called Lady Margareta of San Giusto, not Di Lorenzia, never Di Lorenzia, but the servants whispered, and Margareta listened. They called her the Ghost Princess. Said she looked like her mother. Said Count Adalric hated mirrors. One whispered that she should avoid the Eastern Tower, that bad things slept there. Others said she wasn't the only one brought back from the mountains there had been. Another, she found his name carved into the underside of a chapel pew, Udr. It was her father's name, spelled strangely, a baptization, a code name, or a boy. She searched for weeks. Servants dodged her questions. The governess wept and begged her to stop. The guards turned cold. But one rainy morning, a falconer named Jero gave her a clue. "You want to know what they buried?" he asked, eyes darting. "Find the mirror that doesn't reflect." He vanished the next day. Margareta found his body 2 weeks later, face down in the courtyard cistern. No one claimed the body. No one asked questions, but the message stayed with her. The mirror that doesn't reflect. It was metaphor, of course. Or so she thought, till she returned to the Eastern Tower. The one they told her to avoid. There, behind a tapestry of Saint Marguerite, was a door without a handle. She waited until dusk. Followed the maid who brought wine. Slipped in behind her before the door closed. Inside was a chamber, with no windows, and a wall full of mirrors, except one. It was a frame of silver with a black pane, like glass in shadow. No reflection. She stepped toward it, hand raised. Not a mirror at all. A painting of a boy. Eyes pale, hair dark, skin ashen. He looked like her, and beneath the frame, in gold leaf Latin, Eodric, Filius, Ignotus, Rex Sine, Regno, Eodric, unknown son. King without a crown. She was not the only heir. There had been a brother, a twin, perhaps. Born in silence, kept in shadow, or maybe not a brother at all, but a copy, a body meant to replace hers, a failed claim, a discarded double, or something darker, because the date beneath the portrait read 1292, her year, and the last line was scratched, violently, with a blade, taken, not dead. That night, the walls creaked more than usual. The wind groaned through the eastern windows, and someone tapped at her chamber door, once, twice, then silence. When she opened it, no one was there, only a black feather, and a single thread of parchment tucked into the hinge. You were never the only one. Midnight, crypt stairs, come, alone. The crypt stairs began behind the choir wall, hidden by a rusted votive stand and a curtain of velvet so dusty it coughed when touched. Margareta waited until the bells chimed midnight soft, reluctant chimes that seemed unsure whether to echo or retreat into silence. She wore her simplest cloak, the one that didn't catch torchlight easily, and carried no lantern. The moon would be enough. Or if it wasn't, then shadows would have to guide her. Each step downward whispered a little, louder than the last. The stone beneath her feet was uneven, slick with age, worn smooth by centuries of monastic feet, and something older. Air changed as she descended, first cold, then damp, then strangely dry, as if the stone itself drank in moisture and exhaled dust. She passed carvings half dissolved by time, saints whose faces were now only hollows, names too worn to read. But someone had been down here recently. The cobwebs were broken. Footprints marred the thick layer of grime. One candle, still smoldering, had been placed into a wall notch. Wax spilling like tears dotted the base of the steps was a corridor, and narrow, with alcoves that once held bones but now held only the weight of silence. And in the third alcove on the left, exactly as the note had said, someone waited. He wasn't cloaked, wasn't hooded, wasn't hiding at all. He stood straight, arms folded, watching her with eyes that were not kind and not cruel, just careful, like someone counting thoughts instead of speaking them. "You came," he said. She said nothing. Her hand rested on the inside of her cloak, where a small knife lay hidden. Not because she meant to use it, but because people who summoned you, 2 crypts at midnight, often meant more than conversation. "Do you know me?" he asked. "I know a name," she answered. "I don't know if it belongs to you." He stepped forward. Not enough to touch her, only enough for the candlelight to reveal his face. She didn't gasp, but her breath caught. He looked so much like the boy in the portrait it could have been a mirror. Older, yes, taller. His jaw was defined, his shoulders strong, but the eyes were the same, pale, searching, unreadable. "I was never painted," he said, as if hearing her thoughts. "They took the image from someone else, a cousin, a decoy. My name is Oyudrik, but it was never meant to be remembered." She wanted to ask the obvious question, "Where have you been?" But he answered before she could speak. "Not dead," he said, "but buried all the same, hidden in plain sight. Fed lies, taught to kneel." He gestured to the bones stacked in the corner. "Former abbots, perhaps. Former secrets. They said I was mad," he said, "that I had fever dreams, that I spoke 2 things that weren't there. But I only ever spoke of her. My mother." Margareta felt something twist in her ribs. "Lorenzia," she whispered. He looked up sharply. His voice changed, not harder, just quieter, like a string pulled too tight. "You knew her name. She was mine, too." For a long moment, they stood in silence. Somewhere above them, in the belly of the chapel, the wind moaned through a broken pane. The sound was too human for comfort. "I thought I was the only one," Udrik said. "They told me I was an accident, a ghost, born of sin and silence. Then, when I was 6, they locked me away. Not in stone, but in duty. I was made a scribe, hidden in robes, taught to write others' names while mine faded." He reached into his satchel, drew out a scroll. On it was the lineage of the House of Arberg, inked with perfect precision. "They erased us," he said, "replaced us, made our bloodline disappear, with ink and etiquette. But the crown is still ours, even if it doesn't know it." She wanted to believe him, every word, but belief was expensive, and she had been taught to hoard it. "Why now?" she asked. "Because Count Adaric is dying," Udrik said. "He coughs blood into linens and sends messengers to Vienna that never return. And when he falls, so does the veil." She knew he was right. The halls had grown quieter, the guards slower, the servants more nervous. "They'll name a successor," she said. He nodded. "They already have. His nephew, a boy from the lowlands, 12 years old, raised in Arberg courts, easy to shape, easier to forget. And you want to stop them." He smiled then, but it wasn't cruel. It was sad. "No," he said. "I want to show the world that we were never gone, that the blood they tried to dilute still remembers how to rule." Margareta stepped back. "You want revenge. I want recognition. Same thing." She turned to leave, but he stepped forward, fast, not threatening, just pleading. You've seen the painting. You've seen the crest. Read the old ledgers. You know who you are. She did. That was the worst part. Because knowing something didn't mean you were safe from it. It only meant you had less room to hide. She didn't sleep that night. Not truly. She returned to her chambers before dawn, just as the candlelight began to pale and the corridor shadows receded into corners. The feather was still on the floor. She tucked it into her Bible, between Psalm 137 and a pressed sprig of mountain heather. That day, Count Adalric collapsed during a council meeting, blood from his mouth, tremors in his hands. They carried him from the hall. By nightfall, the physician was burning bandages in the courtyard fire pit, and the cook was crying in the larder. By morning, the bells rang 13 times, not 12, not 14. 13, the number reserved for noble death. Margareta didn't weep. Not because she hated him, but because she felt nothing at all. The court moved fast. Black cloth draped over doorways. Candles lit in every chapel. A messenger dispatched to the Holy Roman Council for succession rites. And then, a name, Nicholas, of Lowenfils Adalric's nephew. Soft eyes, pale lips. A boy who bowed too easily and asked permission to sneeze. The court adored him. Or rather they adored what he would become, malleable, quiet, grateful. Margareta stood in the Hall of Ancestors that afternoon, where the portraits of past rulers lined the walls like silent judges. She stared at the frame marked Ulrich of Great Ulvain, her father, a man whose crown had become a prop in someone else's pageant. The wind rattled the window panes. She didn't turn when Udrich stepped beside her. They'll crown him next week, he said. The Archbishop arrives tomorrow. I know. There's a way to stop it. I know that too. Silence stretched between them. Then he handed her a document. It was old, yellowed, but the seal was intact. Her father's signature, pressed, in crimson wax. In the event of my death, my crown shall pass to my lawful child, of the body of Lorenzia, of Galdem. No gender, no name, just blood, just proof. Where did you find this? In a monk's casket in San Giusto, he said. Hidden beneath the slats. They never destroyed it. They just made it impossible to find. She held it like it would break. Like it was a relic. Maybe it was. And if we show this, they'll laugh. Or worse, they'll bury us again. Then what's the point? To remember, Udrich said. Even if they don't believe. We will. That night, she didn't sleep either. Instead, she took the crown, the one from the reliquary, once called a plaything, and placed it on her head. It fit. Not like destiny, but like memory. She stood in the mirror, not for vanity, but to witness herself, to prove she existed, to remember who she was. Then she reached for the blade hidden beneath her floorboards, not to strike, but to be ready, because coronations are not always peaceful, and the world does not take kindly to ghosts returning. She did not wear mourning black to the coronation. Instead, she chose a deep forest green embroidered only at the cuffs, plain at the throat, silent everywhere else. A color her mother once wore, the monks whispered. A color that did not beg to be seen, but could not be unseen once noticed. The chapel was already full by the time she arrived. Lords in fur and polished boots. Ladies who hadn't smiled since Lent. Priests in red, ringed with gold. Servants pressed to walls like shadows, pretending not to hear. And at the center of it all, Nicholas, the boy. He stood on a cushion before the high altar, draped in cloth so fine, it might as well have been spun from denial. His face was blank, but his fingers fidgeted. He was trying to look noble. He looked scared. The Archbishop raised the crown, not the one from the reliquary. The real one, heavy, gleaming, touched by Ulrich's hands, and meant for someone whose blood still spoke his name. Margareta didn't speak. She walked straight down the nave, each step a defiance. Her shoes echoed against the marble like slow drums. A noblewoman gasped. A steward whispered something frantic. The guards didn't move, not because they didn't want to, but because they weren't sure if they were allowed. She reached the altar before the archbishop lowered the crown. Nicholas looked at her, then at the floor, then nowhere. She looked at the crowd. "This coronation is void," she said, voice calm, not loud, but unyielding. "The line of Great Alvain is not broken." The silence that followed wasn't shocked. It was tired. As if everyone had been waiting for someone to say it. The archbishop hesitated, then spoke with a voice too old for surprise. "And who do you claim to be, child?" "I claim nothing," she said. "I state what already is." Then she pulled the parchment from her sleeve. The decree, Ulrich's seal still intact, wax red as old blood. The document was passed forward, reverently, as if it might crumble. The bishop read it. His lips moved. His eyes widened. His mouth opened, but no words came. The silence shifted. Now, it was dangerous. Because some men profit from broken lineages, and not all crowns are forged from gold. Nicholas spoke first. "I don't want it," he said. It was almost a whisper. "I was told it was mine, that there was no one left." His voice cracked. He was 12. He'd been groomed for power, not truth. Margareta stepped forward. She didn't touch him, but she did kneel. "You are not my enemy," she said. "You are only a boy, and boys are not meant to wear crowns before they have earned the weight." His lip trembled. Someone in the crowd cursed softly. Then another voice deeper, angry, blind with insult. "She's a fraud," came the bark. "A woman, raised in a cloister, claiming thrones by bedtime stories." It was Lord Garwolf, Adalric's cousin. The one who once offered her marriage for duty. The one who had stood to gain a generous estate if Nicholas took the crown. She rose. "I have my father's name," she said. He spat. "Your father had concubines, illegitimate children, bastards stacked like firewood." She didn't blink. "Then let God judge which of us belongs." The archbishop looked ready to faint. Margareta turned her back to the altar. "I do not ask you to love me," she said, "only to remember me." And with that, she stepped aside. Let the crowd see her. Let them stare. Let them wonder what had been kept from them, what had been buried, and why it was rising now. They didn't crown her that. No one dared. Instead, the ceremony was called off. Deliberation, they called it. Ecclesiastical review. But no one left the chapel. Smiling dot. And when the bells tolled the next hour, it was not with joy. It was with warning she found Ayudrik in the crypt again. He hadn't gone to the coronation. He said chapels made his skin itch. "They didn't kill you," he said, sounding vaguely impressed. "They might," she said later. He smiled, not kindly. "They'll send someone," he said. "Maybe two. I know." And she drew the knife again. The same one from beneath the floorboard. "I won't be buried a second time." He touched the parchment with Ulrich's seal. "They'll try to tear it," he said. "Then I'll write another." "With what ink?" She didn't answer. He stepped close. Too close. "You're braver than I thought." "Bravery is just fear that doesn't shut up," she said. He laughed then, real laughter. It echoed off the bones. Then he handed her a coin, old, thin, silver. Ulrich's face on one side, the spiral crest on the other. "Keep it," he said. "You'll need to remind them this isn't a fairy tale." She slipped it into her palm and closed her fist around it like a prayer. That night, someone did come. They didn't knock, just unlocked the door with a key that should have been hers, and stepped in with silence. That wasn't natural. She was ready, not with screams, but with salt. She had laced the chamber, floor with it, dragged it from the kitchen herself. Sprinkled in the corners, across the windowsill, along the doorway. When the figure stepped forward, the air shifted. The candle died, and for the first time in years, she said her own name out loud. "I am Margareta de Lorenzia," she whispered. "Blood of Ulrich. Seed of a mother you forgot to remember." The figure froze, then turned, then left. No sound, no door, just gone. She didn't sleep. She sat with the knife in her lap and the coin between her teeth, tasting old metal and older promises. In the days that followed, the castle changed. Nicholas was sent back to Lowenfils. Lord Garwolf took ill and resigned from court. The Archbishop convened a secret council, and Margareta walked the halls like someone born into them, not exiled from them. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. The walls did it. For her they creaked less. They groaned less. And in the Hall of Ancestors, the portrait of Ulrich no longer hung crooked. In the West Wing, an old seamstress found something. In a locked chest. A dress, small, green, worn by a woman long dead. She gave it to Margareta, said nothing, just nodded once, and disappeared into the tapestry. Room Margareta didn't wear it. She stitched it into her bedding, into the curtains, into the cuffs of her sleeves, not because it fit, but because she did. Finally, in the southern chapel, a bell rang. The Archbishop entered. Alone, he carried no crown, only a box inside it, a ring, plain gold. Ulrich's Margareta took it without ceremony, slipped it onto her finger, and walked out without bowing, because queens do not kneel for silence, they rule it. There was a stair behind the chapel organ, narrow, half-sealed, wrapped in soot and holy dust. No servants went there, no prayers rose from it, and yet it led somewhere older than every hymn ever sung. Margareta had seen it once, as a child, a door shaped like a whisper, a rusted latch that didn't belong. Now, she stood before it again, not as a child, not as a servant, but as someone longer waiting for permission to remember. The key was cold iron, forged long ago. The ring Ulrich once wore fitted perfectly, one twist. A groan from stone, and the dark greeted her like an old friend. The stairs were spiral, descending far beneath even the crypts. The air smelled like wet ash and rotting lilies, the kind of smell that lives only in monasteries, where no one prays anymore. Each step was a question, each breath a test at the bottom. The door was wooden oak, blackened at the hinges, swollen from centuries of damp. She pressed her palm against it. It opened, and she stepped into the archive. Not the royal one. Not the one clerks catalogued with velvet gloves. This one had no bookshelves. Just ledgers locked in chains, scrolls tied shut with wax-sealed hair, and jars dozens each filled with ash, or teeth, or coins, or names. The air trembled. One candle burned, not freshly lit. Not new. Someone had been here recently. On the far wall, a desk, and behind Eitan, Archbishop, without his mitre. He did not look surprised to see her. He simply nodded. You found the ring. She held it up. Silent, he reached into a drawer, pulled out a piece of parchment. On it, Ulrich's seal again, but this time, not in wax. In blood. She didn't ask whose. He unfolded it slowly. There was a child, he said, hidden, because of war, because of prophecy, because too many lords said no when they should have said nothing. She stared at the parchment. Her name was written in it, not just once, many times, in margins, in prayers, in threats. They had always known. The bishop's voice was tired. They kept you hidden not because you were unfit, but because you were undeniable. And sometimes, the truth is more dangerous than a lie. She stepped closer. The jar on the desk held something black like ink, but thicker, viscous. What is that? She asked. He stared at it, then said one word, confession. Then he lit it. The jar hissed, screamed, smoked, and the words on the parchment began to vanish. What have you done? He didn't answer, just pushed a second scroll toward her. This one sealed in silver. This is the one that matters now. She unrolled it. It was blank, but in the center, a space left for one. Named hers. The council met that night, not in the throne hall, but in the tower, where Adalric had once held court during the famine years. The walls were scarred, with knife marks. The windows shuttered. The fire burned blue. 12 chairs. 11 filled. She took the 12th. None stopped her. They read the decree aloud, not the burned one, the new one, crafted by hand, sealed in silence. Then the vote. No cheers, no arguments, just hands raised. 8 in favor. 2 abstained, 1 left the room before the count. Finished, it was done, not with the crown, but with agreement. The next morning, the courtyard was empty, except for one figure cloaked, seated on the edge of the fountain. Iudrik. He was holding a broken pendant. The chain snapped, the charm dented. He didn't look up when she approached. "I'm leaving," he said. "Why?" "Because I was raised to be a ghost," he answered. "And you?" "You were raised to haunt." She sat beside him. "They still fear me." "Good," he said. "Make them. It's the only thing they respect." She reached into her sleeve, offered him the coin again, the one he gave her days before. He didn't take it. "Keep it," he said. "You'll need it to bribe history when it forgets your name again." Then he stood, walked away, not quickly, not sadly, just gone. She watched until he vanished behind the chapel's west arch, and didn't follow. That night, she sat in Ulrich's chair. It wasn't comfortable, it wasn't beautiful, but it was hers. In the hearth, a fire burned low in her lap. The silver-sealed scroll. She opened it, dipped the quill, wrote her name, just once. No titles, no flourish, just the name of a girl who was never meant to live this long, Margareta. Then she folded it shut, and waited the next day. The abbey bells rang 13 times, not for death, but for memory. And when the townspeople gathered at the gates, they found the banner of Gredelvane raised again, not sewn anew, but restored, stitched from fragments, scraps, ashes, and prayer. The wind caught it, and it flew like it had never stopped. The fountain ran dry the morning after the banners were raised, not because the pipes had frozen, not because the servants had forgotten, but because the ground beneath it had shifted, stone cracked like bone, moss peeled like old skin. And when the groundskeeper pressed his palm to the base of the basin, he heard it, a heartbeat. Slow, deep, buried. He didn't report it, not to the guards, not to the court, only to the wind, which carried his name and never returned it. By dusk, he was gone. They found his boots by the chapel door, still warm, still laced, but no footsteps led away, only downward. Margareta had not left the tower in 3 days. She slept little, ate less. There were papers, now bundles of them drawn from the secret archive, from locked cabinets, from monks who had forgotten how to lie, deeds, wills, edicts long erased from official records, but still alive in ink no fire could quite destroy. She spread them across the stone floor, connecting corners with red thread. Each, not a betrayal. Each loop a line back to Ulrich, and always there was a blank spot at the center. The night he died, the story given was too clean. A fever, they said. He didn't suffer. But Margareta had read the coroner's margins. Burns, puncture, throat damage, inconsistent with illness, murder, by someone close. Someone who signed the death writ with a trembling hand, but a steady pen. She stared at the sigil, a spiral, too wide, too loose. Not Ulrich's, not royal, clerical. The bishop of Grunstein had retired to the outer cloisters the year after Ulrich's death. Not for age, not for health, but for silence. No one saw him anymore. His letters came through a one-eyed novice with burn scars and a limp, but his seal, that was still used to bind documents from the court's highest inner circle. Margareta left at dawn. No guards. No escort. Only one torch, and her mother's name stitched into the hem of her cloak. Grunstein lay west, where the trees grew too thick for sound, and the crows stayed longer than they should. The path was mostly stone, but halfway through, it turned to soil, soft, wet, laced with footprints too large to be recent. She passed a broken signpost, then a statue of St. Beryl with the face chipped off, and both eyes scratched hollow. The woods did not welcome her, but they didn't stop her either. Just watched, like everything else in this story. The abbey at Grunstein was carved into the hillside. No bell tower, no gate, just an arch and a door that didn't need hinges to close. She knocked once, nothing, twice, a hiss, then a latch, and the face of the one-eyed novice stared back. He didn't speak, just stepped aside. The hall was narrow, lined with candles so thin their flames shivered when she passed. The walls had no icons, only grooves, as if something sharp had once been dragged through every inch of stone. At the end, the bishop sat in a chair with wheels. He was smaller than she expected, thinner, hair like cobweb, lips cracked from prayer or punishment. He didn't look surprised to see her, only tired. "You found the gap," he said. "No," she answered. "I became it." He smiled, but only barely. "You shouldn't be here. That's what they told my mother, too." He looked away. A minute passed. Then another dot. Then he motioned to a drawer. Inside it, a letter, sealed in green wax. Ulrich's private cipher. "I wasn't meant to keep it," the bishop whispered, "but it was too heavy to burn." She opened it. The ink was faint, as if written in haste. "If I do not survive the winter, seek the truth in the earth, beneath the ash." The vault was never sealed. Margareta looked up sharply. "The vault," he nodded, "under the fountain. The original crypt." She gripped the letter tighter. "Who killed him?" The bishop closed his eye. "A man without a name, paid with a chalice, silent as drought. I saw him once. He wore robes lined with feathers and whispered prayers no saint would answer." She stood. "I need the key." He didn't answer, so she leaned forward and placed Ulrich's ring on the table. It glinted once. He looked at it like an old scar, then reached into his robe a key, small, copper. Warm, she took it without thanks. He didn't ask for one. By the time she returned to the castle, the sky was violet, not the kind of violet that means night, the kind that means storm. Lightning flickered behind the chapel's stained glass. It lit the dry fountain like a stage. Margareta stepped inside the basin, pressed the copper key to the plaque below the cherub's foot. A click. Then a groan so loud it pulled the birds from the trees. The stones parted. A stairwell, revealed, slick, spiral, endless. She did not hesitate. She descended. The door sealed behind her. The air here didn't smell like rot. It smelled like grief. Cold, unprocessed grief, like something someone buried while still warm. The passage led to a chamber, circular, no coffins, no bones, only stone, and in the center an altar. Upon it, a crown, not gold, iron, twisted, warped, and next to it, a glove, Ulrich's, and blood. Dry, yes, but unmistakably his. She touched the iron crown. It pulsed beneath her. Fingers. Once, then silence. On the far wall, a carving, not words, not images, just a spiral. Perfect, taut, coiled. She stepped closer. It wasn't carved. It was burned into the wall itself, and below it, one word, heir. She rose, her breath calm, her fingers steady. The glove in her hand, the crown left behind, not out of fear, out of purpose, above her. The chapel bells rang. 4 times. That was wrong. 4 was not a time, it was a warning. She climbed, not slowly, not cautiously, but like someone whose story was finally trying to reach its ending. She emerged. The courtyard was full, not of people, of crows, dozens, perched on railings, statues, chimneys, all silent, all watching. Then she saw it, a figure in the tower window. Not Udrik, not the bishop, someone else, someone whose robes moved like smoke and eyes glinted, like coins submerged in oil. He did not move, he did not smile, but she knew Ulrich's killer had returned, and this time he hadn't come for a king. He had come for the queen who remembered. She did not scream, even as the figure vanished from the window like a page turned too fast, even as the first crow lifted from the chapel spire and flew a perfect circle above her head, even as the air folded in on itself, carrying the scent of burnt feathers and forgotten incense. She simply stepped down from the fountain, not like a queen, not like a girl, but like someone who already knew the end and wasn't afraid of meeting it face first. The castle doors were closed, barred, but they opened anyway. No hands touched them, just wind, or something wearing the shape of it. Inside, the corridor torches flickered in sequence, not all at once, one by one, left to right, as if guiding her somewhere she'd never been but had always been meant to reach. She passed the dining hall, now empty, past the tower stairs, where once her mother had been dragged up and locked away, past the tapestry room, where the Seamstress no longer sat. Each room blinked out as she passed. Lights dimming. Chambers breathing. The castle waking. Because she wasn't walking through history anymore. She was walking through memory. And memory had teeth. At the end of the corridor, a door she didn't remember. That was the first sign. Because Margareta remembered everything. The servant keys. The smell of the linen vault. The sound the attic made when snow pressed too. Heavy on the roof. But this door was new, old, and humming. She placed her hand against it. It was cold, but not dead. It pulsed once, then opened. No lock, no push. It simply allowed her in. The room was round, dark dot. The walls covered in mirrored panels cracked, scratched, warped like water left too long in silver bowls. And in the center, a chair would dot thorns for arms. A basin beside it, full of ash, and beside that, kneeling a man dot at least. That's what her eyes told her. Her blood said something else. He was tall, robed in something that moved like breath, not fabric. Feathers hung from his shoulders, not attached, nested like they'd grown there. His hands were bare, but the veins glowed faintly, like river maps, on winter skin. She stepped forward. He didn't look up, didn't speak, didn't breathe. But the ash in the basin rippled, and the mirrors began to murmur. Whispers, too faint to parse, but full of syllables shaped like her name. Finally, he looked at her, and his eyes were not eyes. They were glass, black, seamless, reflecting only her. "You know who I am," he said. Not a question, a curse. Margareta swallowed. "I know what you did." He stood, not rushed, not violent, but with the gravity of someone for whom rising is the only verb that matters. "I killed a king," he said. And then, almost softly, "But I did not murder him." She stepped closer. "Ulrich trusted you." He smiled. It didn't reach his face. He trusted everyone, even his enemies, especially his daughter. Her jaw tensed. "You're lying." He shook his head once, then raised a hand. The ash in the basin rose twisting, coiling, shaping, a throne, a chalice, a woman's face. Her mother, then Ulrich bent over a desk, quill in hand, signing something, blood dripping from his fingers. He was already dying, said the figure. The sickness was slow, made slower by fear. But he knew he wouldn't last the winter. Margareta's voice was raw now. Then, why stage it? "Because kings don't die quietly," he said. "They require theater." The ash collapsed. "You were the final act." He stepped closer. "Ulrich asked for it," he said. "Asked me to make it look like treason. So you'd have a reason to come back. So no one could erase you. Not if you were the vengeance they all feared." Margareta shook her head. "No, he would have told me. He did." Then he reached into the folds of his robe, pulled out a stone, smooth, round, a spiral carved into it. "This is the memory stone," he said. "Not a record, not a diary, a confession." He pressed it to her palm. It burned cold, then hot, then vanished, not dropped, not pocketed, vanished, and in its place a whisper Ulrich's voice, faint breathing against her bones. "They won't remember you unless they're afraid of what you remember. Let them fear you, Margareta. That's the only safety left." She staggered. The man-thing didn't move, only waited, then said, "I've done what I was paid to do. The story is yours now. Keep it, or bury it." He turned and walked through the mirror. Not into it, through, and vanished. The chair was still. There, the thorns, the basin. She didn't sit, but she didn't leave either. She stood there, long enough for the mirrors to forget what they were reflecting. Long enough for her reflection to look different, older, not weary, but changed. A woman who no longer wondered who she was, only what she would become. When she returned to the upper halls, the castle had changed again. The wind had stopped. The crows were gone. The guards bowed no. Horns, no ceremony, just a silent nod. Passed from face to face, like a new prayer dot, in the throne hall. The steward waited, nervous dot holding something wrapped in cloth. He offered it to her without speaking. Inside, a crown. Not Ulrich's single quotes, not iron, not new, but one never worn, made for a queen, who never got to wear it. Her mother's still warm. She took it not to wear, to carry, because some power is not for display, it's for remembering. She went to the crypt that night, lit no candle, left no flowers, only the memory stone, which had returned to her pocket somehow and now glowed faintly as it touched the slab with Ulrich's name. "Thank you," she whispered. Not for the crown, not for the plan, but for letting her come back without apology. The stone pulsed once, then went. Dark outside. The first snow fell. Thin, white, reluctant. And on the highest balcony, where no banners flew, Margareta stood, hair unbound, hands bare. And for the first time in years, she did not feel small. She felt seen by the stars, by the stone, by the spiral, and by the memory of a man who died, not to be remembered, but to make sure she would be. The snow did not stop. Not after midnight, not after morning, not even when the sun cracked, opened the clouds like a yoke. It fell in silence. Not soft, but steady, like it knew what it was covering, and didn't want it seen again by the third hour. Of morning, the castle was white to the knees, the old statues buried to the brows, and the northern stables gone quiet as the frost took every last horse breath into glass. Margareta stood in the war room. Maps unfurled, ink frozen in the inkwells. No guards stood by the doors. They didn't need to. She wasn't being protected anymore. She was the reason for the barricades. The steward had not slept in 2 nights. He paced now like a crow might pace her attic, jittery, one eye always tilted toward the window. He had something to say. She could feel it. But she let him suffer in the pause. Only when the 4th pacing step hit the same tile again did she finally speak. Out with it. He froze, turned, swallowed. They've returned. She didn't need to ask who. The exiles. Those who had left the court before Ulrich felt self-imposed. Banishment. Noble families who chose silence over submission. Some said they'd gone to the coast. Some to the salt mines. But now they were back. And not alone. They came with letters. Banners. And the one thing the castle feared more than Blade's history. Because they hadn't forgotten they had documented. Margareta folded the map carefully, slid it into the shelf behind her, then turned, slowly. Are they armed? The steward hesitated. Then, with names. She nodded. That was worse than swords. The first to arrive was Lady Trevina of Holomark. Wrapped in grey, no jewelry, no entourage, just her walking cane, carved from sycamore, and a leather satchel she clutched like a holy relic. She bowed low, lower than Margareta expected. "Your Grace," she said, "do you recognize me?" Margareta stared. "I remember your voice." Trevina smiled sadly. "I sang you lullabies before the council forbade it." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was holy. Then Trevina opened the satchel inside. A ledger bound in cord. Pages, YELLOWED. The sigil stamped on its face. House Eden. Winter Archives, Volume 19. Margareta didn't speak. She reached unwrapped and began to read. What she found inside was not a diary. It was a log, a list of children, orphans, exiles, disinherited bloodlines, swept into the corners of distant provinces. Each entry recorded their weight, age, parentage or suspected parentage in a mark, R or C, refused, claimed, and on page 12 her name, but not her name. The name she was given before the wet nurse called her Margareta. She blinked. The steward crossed himself. Lady Trevina said nothing, only pointed to the margin there. Scribbled in tiny frantic script, hidden under Gredelvane per Ulrich's 2nd clause. Raised outside title. Not to ascend unless all spirals. A line. She ran her fingers over the words. The ink smudged, old, real proof. "What does it mean?" she asked. But Trevina only stepped back and whistled, not loud, but deliberate. And from the corridor, another figure emerged. Male, tall, robed in black eyes, blindfolded, holding a box. He walked like one who had memorized the hallways, and when he reached Margareta, he bowed, then knelt. then offered the box. She took it, unlatched the lid. Inside, a mask, bone-lined with silver thread, shaped like a spiral, too large for a face, too small for a crown. Trevina spoke. Each claimant of the line must wear it once, to listen, not to be seen. Margareta hesitated, then placed it over her eyes. At first nothing, then dash sound, like wind through iron leaves. Then a voice, no longer whispering, commanding, double quotes. If you are hearing this, it means the vault has been breached. It means the lie is dying. It means you are the last tether to what we were meant to be. They will call you unfit. They will paint you illegitimate. But remember, so were all beginnings. She inhaled sharply. The mask pulsed. You must find the final clause. It is not in the archives. It is not in the chapel. It is in the tomb of the man I never named. The sound ended. The mask went cold. She removed it, eyes burning, hands shaking. Knelt. For 50 years we have waited, she said, for someone who could listen without flinching. Margareta didn't respond. She was already walking. The tomb lay in the oldest part of the cemetery, past the walls, beneath the leaning statues of saints whose names had been scratched out during the rain. Famine, there were no markings, no candles, just a slab, smooth black dot. She had been there once, as a child, told it was a marker for the nameless dead. But now she knew better. The man Ulrich never named wasn't a stranger. He was her grandfather, the first rebel, the one who tried to fracture the crown 3 reigns ago and failed. His name had been removed from all records, but not from the bloodline. She placed her hand against the stone. Nothing. Then she whispered, and the stone split. No sound, just a seam, opening like an old mouth. Inside dash stairs, always stairs. They descended into blue light, and below, something ancient breathed, once not with lungs, but with memory. The chamber was round, always round, and, in the center, not a coffin, a circle, carved in crystal. The spiral again, but beneath it words. When the line breaks, the spiral turns, not backward, not forward, inward. At the center of the circle, a blade, small dot, dagger dash shaped, silver, wrapped in parchment. She reached for it, unfolded the wrapping, read the last of Ulrich's hidden words. This is not for war. It is for truth, and truth, when cut, bleeds history. The spiral beneath her began to glow. Lines lit up, chasing each other inwards. Her feet moved on their own, into the center. The blade in her hand, and behind her, voices began to rise. Not loud, not angry, just names. Thousands of them. The ones erased. The ones renamed. The ones who built the throne, then were forbidden to sit near it. They did not scream. They chanted, and she wept, but did not look away. She stood in the spiral's center until the last name was spoken, then stepped out, and the light dimmed. The blade had cooled, but it left a mark on her palm. A spiral, burned into flesh. Not a scar, a seal, when she emerged. The snow had stopped, and the sky was no longer gray. It was black dot, clean studded with stars, and the bells were ringing. Not 12, not 13, but 0 silence. As a number, a warning, a permission. Because now nothing was the same. And somewhere above, the chapel, in the window where Ulrich once watched the kingdom he could not save, a new shadow waited. But this one did not wear feathers. It wore her name, and smiled. The bells stopped, not with a chime, not with an echo dot, just dash stopped, like a song paused mid-breath, like a heartbeat that knew it had one final beat, and decided not to waste it. The silence wasn't empty. It was full, thick, alive. Margareta stood beneath the old armory archway, the sky above her stripped bare of clouds, stars gleaming like relics. But it was not the stars that watched her now. It was the council. They were waiting, and unlike the exiles who brought ledgers and names, the council brought something else. Doctrine and blood. They did not sit around a single table. No, they never sat. That was their rule. The circle of witnesses, as they were once called, believed that sitting implied rest, and rest was the first luxury of tyrants. So they stood, always, 7 of them, old, robed, faces faded behind veils of parchment thread and powdered silk, eyes inked closed in ceremonial defiance. They claimed to see more that way. The one in the center. The speaker wore a crest of stitched bone and unlit wax. His voice was thin, but unwavering. You returned to the spiral. Margareta didn't. Answer, you descended without sanction. Still, silence. You summoned the names. At this, she spoke. They summoned me. The speaker's veil shifted. A tilt, perhaps a smile. The blade. She raised her hand. The burn across her palm still glowed faintly spiral red, like fresh wax on a royal writ. He exhaled slowly. A mistake. Margareta stepped forward. No, a memory. The chamber fell still. One of the other witnesses stirred, not to speak, but to unroll something. A scroll, ancient crumbling, laid flat upon a stone held by 4 acolytes. The speaker gestured. The first treaty, he said. Signed in ash, not ink. Sealed by the founder herself. He traced a line. This clause was buried after the 3rd fracture. We were told it was myth, but your return, he looked up, has changed our certainty. Margareta walked toward the scroll. The words were old, dialect cursive sharp, curved like thorn branches, meant to be hard to read, hard to speak, hard to alter, but she understood it. Each word burned like a name. When the fire returns to the spiral, and the names are spoken once more, the line shall bend not break, and the crown shall answer to the blade. The acolytes stirred. That was the clause. The buried one. Not removed because it was false, but because it was dangerous. The crown shall answer to the blade. Her blade, the one still tucked into her belt. Still warm, even now. The speaker nodded slowly. This cannot be allowed. And from the shadow behind the altar a figure moved. Not fast, not loud, but certain armored, HELM, with a sword shaped like a question mark, curved, elegant, lethal. The first blade, not a man, not anymore. A title, passed from oathbreaker to exile, to zealot, to ghost. The council's assassin, and he was here for her. She did not flinch, only unhooked her cloak, let it fall. Drew the spiral dagger with one hand, extended the other, palm, open. The mark glowed. She spoke, not to him, to the chamber itself, to the air, to the walls, to the very floor. I claim the memory. The blade stopped. Something rippled. The mirrors behind the witnesses cracked, and the speaker hissed. No. Margareta turned slowly to him. History doesn't belong to you anymore. The first blade lowered his sword, tilted his head, as if listening. Then stepped back and vanished. Chaos didn't erupt. It unfolded. One of the witnesses collapsed. Another screamed too long, too thin, like they had not used their throat for years and didn't know how to stop. The scroll burst into flame. No fire. Just flame, pure, spiral-shaped. Margareta walked through it, unburned. The chamber dimmed, and above them all, where once the royal crest hung a new symbol was etched in smoke. The spiral wider now opened at night. She did not sleep. She sat in her mother's old room unopened since the morning. The walls still held her perfume. The dust had shaped itself into patterns only grief could interpret. She found a letter in the drawer. Not signed, but she knew the hand. I could not protect you from the council, but I buried the truth deep enough that only you would know where to dig. There was a key wrapped in black cloth. It didn't open a door. Not in the castle, not in the crypt, but in the northern pass, on the edge of the forgotten territories, where the sun never fell right and the wind whispered backwards. The place where the spiral kings were born. The original ones. Before the wars. Before the treaties. Before the witnesses. Rose. That was where the next step lay. Not in ink, not in stone, but in breath. Living breath. Because someone was still alive out there. Someone who knew the first clause. The one that never made it to any scroll. The clause that started the spiral at dawn. Margareta rode out. No escort, no crown, just the blade, the key, and the stone. Not the memory stone. A new one, given by Trevina in silence. Smooth, clear, glass-like, with a single word etched into its center. Begin. She slipped it into her cloak, as the gate closed behind her, and the snow, soft again now, began to fall like ash across the valley. The girl's hand was steady. The stone she gave glowed faintly in Margaretta's palm, not with light, but with gravity. Not weight, but purpose. The word etched into its center was no longer soft. Return, and she understood. It didn't mean to go back, it meant to bring back what never should have been hidden. The child who had knelt now stood, not older, not younger. Only, clearer. Her eyes weren't black anymore. They were full of mirrors. Not reflecting Margaretta, reflecting memory. Dozens of them. Centuries of them. Kings, exiles, healers, traitors, mothers who burned themselves into dust to shield truth. Scribes who inked histories they were never allowed to speak aloud. And she understood this girl wasn't alive. Not in the way she knew life. She was the memory clause, given breath. And now, Margaretta's task was not to lead, it was to remember. Not privately, not silently, but aloud. And in front of the council, the chamber was already full when she returned. The witnesses did not rise. They no longer could. Their legs had fused with the floor, bone wrapped in root. They were not people now. They were monuments, tombstones, that still murmured judgments. But Margaretta didn't look at them. She walked past to the dais, the place where coronations were once whispered in 7 dialects and sealed with 7 drops of blood. She did not kneel. She reached into her cloak and placed the stone, return at the center, and the spiral, beneath the throne, began to turn, not fast, not loud, just enough for dust to shift. The blade she carried rose from her belt on its own, and floated not by magic, by memory. It turned once, then dropped, point down into the spiral's center. The ground opened, a seam again. But this one did not lead down, it led inward, and from it, the names emerged, not the people, the names spoken aloud, one, by mouths that had never been taught to lie. Trevina entered last. She walked barefoot, holding the final scroll, the one sealed by Ulrich's own wax. Never opened. Margaretta nodded once. Trevina broke the seal, and read aloud. We, the forgotten, do not seek vengeance. We seek balance. Let no ruler rise who forgets the silence that bore them. Let no doctrine bind the name of a child before they speak it aloud themselves. And with that, the scroll turned to ash. No flame, just disappearance, as if it had only been waiting to be read once. The witnesses dissolved. Not dramatically, not in fire. They crumbled into salt. Because that's what history does. When it's no longer protected by fear, and the chamber's doors opened to wind. No guards, no proclamations. Just wind, pure, honest. She did not take the crown. She placed it on the floor, and left it, because power should not be worn, not anymore. It should be remembered by those who know the price. She walked from the chamber, not as queen, not as heir, not as spiral burned, just as herself, a name with no title, a silence with no need to scream. Outside, the valley was green again, not all the way, but the frost had begun to loosen its hold, and the people had gathered, not in fear. In listening, she stood before them, held nothing, wore nothing, only. The spiral burned into her palm, and when they asked what she would do next, she simply said, "We will begin again. But this time, we begin awake, and deep below." Where the spiral once turned in secrecy, turned one last time, then stilled. Not because it was over, because it was ready, and above it all, in the tallest window, the banner that once bore the spiral lanced itself, fell, and was carried off by the wind, not to vanish, but to land on a child's lap, in a distant village, where stories were still whispered by candlelight. And so it began again, quietly, as all true endings do.